Welcome to the Elevator Pitch podcast, where I dive into interesting quality companies with promising growth prospects. The episodes are based on my Substack write-ups that you can find at elevatorpitch.substack.com. Don't hesitate to connect on x.com, Threads, Blue Sky, or Substack directly, or you can email me at theelevatorpitch@outlook.com. What a week. Tariffs are up, even on penguins, it seems, and markets are very down. Uncertainty is peaking. It's a weird cocktail. But to be fair, the only edge we have, I guess, is being a bit longer term than the traders. So let's continue to look at companies and hopefully get some very good entry points here. Now, what's interesting is all of the companies get whacked, but some of them are going to be more resilient. And I think the one we're going to be talking about today is one of those. It should not be affected by the tariff in the current form, given there's an exception for pharmaceutical. Also, it could change. Now, I actually came across the company we're going to cover today while looking at another one, Galderma. So Galderma is a Swiss IPO from private equity company EQT that happened in early Q2 2024. And Galderma was really known to be a joint venture between Nestlé and L'Oréal, so two big heavyweights of consumer brands, and they are the number two in the injectable aesthetics business. And I really wanted to like it because, well, I really like L'Oréal, I like Nestlé. But the more I looked into it, the less I was interested. Injectable, which is, of course, the more interesting part of the business for me, was only about 1/3 of the profits. The rest was Cetaphil, which is kind of, a legacy skincare cream, which got completely killed by CeraVe. And the remaining of the business was prescription drug businesses where, they were going to be losing the IP soon. And on top of it, they were launching this new prescription drug, Nemo, for dermatitis. And if you've covered pharma companies, it creates a lot of volatility. You have kind of to do the life cycle of the drug between the moment it is approved and the moment it is going into generic. So it kind of added complexity to what should have been a pretty simple cash pay business, honestly. And as I was doing my due diligence on Galderma, I found this small US company, so that's 800 million US market cap, a bit less actually since last week, was completely disrupting the space. And I mean, disruption in consumer space is always a bit iffy in my view. Scale matter a lot, distribution matter a lot. So when you find disruptor, you really have to spend a lot of time making sure there's no fad risk, that one day you're the Dollar Shave Club being bought by 1 billion by Unilever, and the next you're being impaired for 80% of your value. And story repeats itself. Chobani one day, the next Danone is killing you, Away gauges, and 3 years later you don't exist anymore. Celsius energy drink, one day you're so hype, and the next everyone hates you. So finding disruptor is always very interesting, but it's always pretty risky, and you really have to make sure you found a company which has staying power, proper moat, and it's not gonna just disappear into the next the next cycle. And maybe it's a good reminder that even though I've done a lot of work, and you should of course always do your own work, it's not financial advice, but Evolus is one of those disruptors, which means it's a lot more riskier than some of the other names we may have discussed here. Now, Evolus is a super interesting company. It has grown revenue extremely fast, about 50% CAGR since IPO, so 18 to 2024. And despite being around for more than 10 years, it's not profitable. And we're going to talk about that at the crux of whether this is interesting or not. But first, let me tell you a little bit about the injectable market, because it's a very interesting market. And the elevator pitch on the injectable market is very simple. People are vain. Now, injectables is about 10 billion market, split about equally between neuromodulators or toxin, and you will be familiar with Botox. So, you inject it and it kind of freezes the muscle. So it makes your face look smoother, makes the wrinkles disappear. And the other part of the market are fillers, which are gel-like substances that get injected below the skin, that structure and also smooth the appearance of the skin. Now, overall injectable penetration is still quite low. It's still, something that's marginal, I would say. Penetration, as measured by, adults using those products, has been increasing, but in the most penetrated country, South Korea, it's still only about 20%. The US will be the second most penetrated market at about 15, 17%, and it's the largest market just because of the number of people in the US. But what's super interesting is, of course, the intention to use in the next 5 years are twice as high as current user base. So if you look at globally, the penetration is about 5 to 10%, and there's another 5 to 10% of the global population who wants to try in the next 5 years. And it's not only wealthy older people; it's really becoming more and more mainstream. And of course, we can thank Hollywood, we can thank social media, we can thank HD camera, and just in general, people are having a lot more focus into what they look like, their self-care, and that's really all this injectable because those are very easy procedures to get. Now, what's great about the product in itself, the business, is that it gets the best of both worlds of prescription drugs and luxury skincare, basically. So, like prescription drugs, they need to be FDA approved. You need to go through clinical trials, which is expensive. It takes time. It really creates a pretty big barriers to entry for incumbents. FDA is also quite specific about those products. So there's only 6 approved formulation at the moment for neuromodulator in the US, including Botox and Jeuveau, which is the Evolus formula. Now, those products can, also only be purchased and injected by medical professional, which require a dedicated sales force, dedicated logistics network, and those professionals are quite fragmented in the US, of course. They don't really have any pricing power. So think of, aesthetic surgeons, dermatologists, just, each with their own practice, and they don't buy in bulk. Now, that's great for, of course, the Evolus and the AbbVie and the Galderma of this world, who can then have a lot of pricing power. But of course, it does create, again, some barriers to entry, especially because most of that business is end of year volume rebate. So let's say you work in dermatology, at the end of the year, AbbVie or Galderma are going to give you a rebate depending on how many products from their portfolio you've managed to push. So you don't really have an incentive to dual or triple source. Again, pretty big barriers to entry here. Now, it's also all the advantages in injectable from luxury skincare, right? Because the truth is, injectable don't really have a specific target population. They can target everyone, right? So all of the adults as they age could be a customer for injectable. And at the same time, injectables, they don't cure the issue, right? We're all aging, unfortunately, and our faces are changing. So if you start using injectable and you want to keep the appearance of a younger face, well, you do have to continue using them. So people who are using injectable usually have to have a new injection every 3 to 6 months on the toxin side, and it's a bit less often on the filler side. But if you want that effect to stay visible, and it's from what I've read, is quite brutal. Like when the product starts dissolving and then your face come back, people kind of very quickly make a new appointment. So it definitely creates a lot of loyalty, and of course that brings recurring revenue in a way. Now, Evolus is very interesting. It was started in 2012. It IPO'd in 2018. Before Evolus, AbbVie and Galderma, they own about 85%, 85, of the US toxin markets, and it took Evolus about 10 years to finally get traction. In 2019, they had about, just after the IPO, they had about 4% market share, and by 2024, they had risen to 14%, 1-4. It's very impressive, and to their credit, they did not only take market share from the big guys, but they really extended meaningfully the market by addressing new consumer, which before would never have gotten an injection. So the success basically can be boiled down to 2 things. The first thing is, well, the product is on the cheaper side. So they license Day Wong formula, which they got approved in the US, and they sell it for about 20% discount to Botox from AbbVie or Dysport from Galderma, and the result is similar. All the clinical trials they've done, basically, it's exactly the same. It's a bit cheaper. That's a pricing choice from Evolus. But what really sets them apart, the second thing, is their go-to-market strategy. While Avi and Galderma, they really focused, and those are more, medical company when you think of it, right? Galderma was really started from the dermatology angle, and Avi, well, Allergan at the time, they really also had this very pharma angle. So they market to medical professional, and that's kind of it, right? They don't really have interaction with the end consumer. But here, this is a cash pay product, right? There's no reimbursement, there's no it has to come from the will of the patient or the customer here actually to come here and say, hey, I want an injection. You have to pay for it. No one will pay for you. So what Evolus did, they took a page from the direct-to-consumer marketing book, and they started to advertise directly to end user with large national campaign, co-branded campaign with medical practices, and consumer loyalty program. So they have about 1 million consumers, so end customer, on their loyalty platform. If you do enough injection of Evolus products, you get discounts. So by driving the end consumer to ask the brand, right, when they go to their medical practitioner, they're bypassing the usual, medical prescriber because, well, usually people will go and say, hey, I want a Botox injection because that's what they know. And, if the dermatologist or the aesthetic surgeon is using Dysport, well, it's kind of potato, right? It's kind of the same thing. So they will not really care. What matters is the result. And the result is the same. So what Evolus did, which was smart, is really addressing that end consumer. And the second thing that helped into that phenomenon is really the emergence of medical spas. So medical spas in the US are those kind of it's clinics which are all about cash pay self-care, and they do everything from injection, injectable, or micro needling, laser treatment. So it's all about making you more beautiful, feeling better, but it's all cash pay and it's all bordering between medical and kind of skincare slash beauty. And those clinics have grown extremely fast. There's about 10,000 of those in the US at the moment, but the in the last 5 years, 5,000 of them have opened. So clearly, plus 100% growth in the last 5 years is very impressive. Now, those clinics, they had no loyalty to AbbVie or to Galderma. They don't have any other prescription drugs that could have swayed them that to get more volume with AbbVie, which was a very large portfolio of prescription. You would also take their injectables. No, that they were kind of new, and Evolus, by being cheaper, was also a very interesting value proposition for them as they were opening. And Evolus really got, I think, a lot of traction from the medical spas, and really helped the growth. And medical spas continue to grow at the moment, so that should continue to support Evolus here. Now, going forward for Evolus, they made about 266 million of revenue in 2024, and they want to reach 700 million of revenue by 2028. That's an implied growth of about 26% per annum or 27 from 2024. And the way to think about that growth is three buckets, right? The first bucket is simply continuation of the strategy in the US. So more value product, more marketing. They're starting a subscription business, right? So you can pay $49 per month and get an injection every 90 days at a medical practitioner who has Evolus product. So that's going to be a baseline of, let's call it high single digit, which is kind of where the industry is growing, assuming they don't take market share, of course. Now, the second bucket, which is the largest bucket, is the launch of the filler product. So until now, Evolus only had Jeuveau, which was a toxin product, so a Botox competitor. Now they're finally launching a filler line. They bought the license from Symatese, which is the company who developed the filler from Galderma. So if you know Restylane, same company. It's a new manufacturing technology, which is a cold manufacturing technology, which allow for the filler to look more natural on the skin and to be more efficient, so you don't have to inject as much product. So very interesting new development, and it's very, in a way, it's funny that it's kind of the value proposition companies that is gonna come with the more high-tech product in the market now. Now, having a filler line is very important because 70% of people who get a toxin injection also get a filler injection, right? So it's kind of the same population, and they tend to do both at the same time, or they do one and the other, a bit later, just to make their face as beautiful as possible. And one of the challenges, of course, for medical practitioners, as we mentioned, a lot of them, the margin really come from getting those volume rebates. So they had to have the, let's say, the Jeuveau product for the toxin, but for the customer, if they wanted to have the full offering, they had to have the filler from Galderma or AbbVie, which then all of a sudden split their purchasing, which means they have less volume rebates. So by having their own filler, Evolus is no longer at a competitive disadvantage, as they can really offer a full offering to medical spa and medical practitioners that can get really all of the volume from injectable from Evolus if that's what they want. Maybe also a quick word. I didn't put it in the write-up because right now it's anecdotal, but I think it's very interesting. The fillers that Evolus has gotten through the FDA approval and the European approval, they come with the weight loss label, right? So a lot of people who have been on GLP-1, so Ozempic or Mounjaro, whatever version they have, the fast loss of weight is really detrimental to a lot of the structuring fat we have in the face, which means it kind of makes the face very hollowed out. And there's actually a term which is, people say, oh, you have Ozempic face for those people because it really suck all of the fat out, which means your face is, well, a lot of bones basically. So that has been driving a lot of people to go to those medical practices to get fillers injection to help restructure a little bit the face and to help them, have a more natural face. And those new filler from Evolus, they have this label, weight loss, and that's going to be hopefully a very good marketing argument for medical practitioner to advise to use those one instead of the current filler on the market. Even so, full transparency, I don't think it makes any difference, but at the end of the day, indication and label, they do matter for when you inject something on your face. It's a pretty sensitive topic, so it does matter. Now, the last bucket of growth for Evolus, right? And again, so growth in the US, the filler line, and the last bucket of growth is international. And international is a bit new. Again, Evolus is not a new company, but so far they really spend all of their time and investment in the US. Now they finally got their toxin, Jeuveau, which we call Nuceva, approved in Europe, in Canada, and I think in Australia. Same thing with the filler. So now they can start going into international market and replicate the playbook. I think at the moment in the target number, it's a bit less than 100 million out of the additional 430 million they want to get to. So it's not the largest, but it has a lot of potential. I think if they make it work. So that's kind of the big three bucket. But we're getting to what I think is the most important for Evolus to work as a stock is the profitability, right? So far the company, again, it's been around for quite some time. They spend a lot of money to get those 14% market share in the US, and that's really, eaten out all of the profitability. So the company has a 70% gross margin, but until last year, EBITDA has been negative, and they had to really finance the growth because they need the inventory, the clinical trial, and all of the marketing effort. Now, the company says they can get about 20% to zero adjusted EBIT margin by 2028. I don't know if that's achievable. My model is a bit below that. But what's for sure is if they can get the marketing in check, and then it normalizes as a percent of sale, then there's no reason they can make a good margin. And when I look at a company like Galderma or AbbVie, and they don't really disclose the margin of injectable, but it's pretty clear they are making at least around 30% EBITDA margin. Or if we consider Evolus maybe is accepting to earn a little less because they want to be at a discount, it could be 20-25% mature EBITDA margin for that business. Still, that would be amazing because right now they are not making any money. So on my numbers, they get to about 16% EBIT margin, and that's about 77 million EBITDA. So if you slap 13 to 15 times EV/EBITDA on that, you're making 30% per annum price change. And the multiple really, it's a mix of looking at Galderma, but also at the cash pay specialty therapeutics, right? So think of Align, Straumann, Alcon, all those things like glasses, teeth that you will do for appearances, and that you will be, you kind of cash pay most of it. So that's what I've been using. So have a look, but if you believe that's kind of the area, 13 to 15, that's gonna be a very, very good performer if they can execute. Now, the good news is there's not too much debt, so this is not making a lot of money, but at least there's only about 2 times net debt to adjusted EBITDA, so risk of default is kind of limited to a certain extent. Management looks very solid. The CEO, David Moatad-Sadi, and the Chief Medical Officer, Ru Avela, they're both from Avi or Allergan, where they had executive function, which I really like a lot. I think, if you can get into those disrupting company, people who know what goods looks like, what the leader of the market have been doing. I think it gives them a really big leg up. And the CFO, Sandra Beaver, is also very qualified. I met with her once in the past. I thought she was really on top of the numbers. And she has, I think she was very articulate on the growth of opportunity here. Now, the founders of Evolus, they do not own meaningful shares anymore. We don't know who they are actually. That's very interesting. But they are no longer with the company. They get a royalty from the Jeuveau, which is going to go until 2030, I think, mid-single digits. But yeah, that's about it. For the rest of the owner, it's basically free float. I think, as I mentioned, the valuation looks attractive, especially now. The tariff, again, Evolus should be exempt. I think even if we see some softness in consumer spending, I mean, people tend to be, quite um, loyal to those products, a bit like luxury skincare. There's not a lot of trade down historically, but that could change, of course. What we may see is people postponing the treatments. That's a risk. But in a way, if you think Jeuveau or Evolus in general is more of a value products, and we could see some trade down from people who don't really want to pay, $700 for the Botox, but they will be happy to pay, $400 for the Jeuveau for the same effect. So that could, if you wanted to see the bright side of consumer softness. Now, biggest risk, of course, is no tariff exemption, right? So if the pharmaceutical exemption do not apply, to the injectable product, because Evolus imports everything from South Korea for the toxin and from France for the filler, that's going to be pretty high tariff. Now, again, it's a 70% gross margin business, so nothing that they could not absorb in a way. It's probably they're going to have to raise, I think on my number, about 5% the prices to absorb, but yeah, it's not great. And then the last thing I want to mention is they don't own the IP in a way, right? So they license the IP from Daewon, from the toxin Jeuveau, and from Symatese. Those licenses, they come with, minimum volume to achieve every year. There's kind of a lot of strings attached to those licenses. So, Evolus need to execute. Otherwise, they may be at risk of losing the licenses, and that's a going concern. That's a bit of a riskier name around those issues. But yeah, in conclusion, I think Evolus is very interesting. I really like the industry. The only pure player in injectable, which is one of the fastest growing segment of beauty in general. They clearly have a very good playbook. They are launching the filler, which will accelerate growth. And if they unlock profitability, then it's going to be a very interesting company. It could also be acquired. I think, I never put any M&A premium on the names I look at. I think they should be able to walk by themselves. But the truth is, it's a sub $1 billion market cap. So, tomorrow, any of the beauty company, from Estee Lauder, L'Oreal, Elf, whatever, could decide to come in and buy the company. So, that would give you a easy 30% upside here if that were to happen. Debt is manageable, which is very important given they are not yet profitable. There's a visibility to cash flow being cash flow positive, which again is quite important here, and management looks solid. So yeah, a very interesting company. I'm very curious to know what you think. Please don't hesitate to let me know on any of the socials or drop me an email at theelevatorpitch@outlook.com. Your feedback is super important. Thanks a lot for tuning in, and good luck for the weeks to come. And don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcast and visit elevatorpitch.substack.com for more in-depth analysis. Thanks a lot for listening.